Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is Ron's Rundown. We're going to go over 10 college football games for Week 8, Saturday, October 21st, 2023. Now, if you like what you see, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to put your college football picks in the comment section below. And if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. Alrighty, let's get into it. Here are the games for Week 8 in college football. First up, we see UCF and Oklahoma, an early afternoon game, 12 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be on ABC. Now, I'm always a bit hesitant laying a big number like this with a team facing an opponent that can run the ball efficiently and consistently. And while, UCF has struggled so far in Big 12 play, they still run the ball very well, 6 yards a carry and over 240 yards per game this season. And now you're getting your starting quarterback back in John Reese Plumlee, who missed some time with a leg injury, and he's expected to be 100% in this game. I think, even though Timmy McClain was pretty solid in the backup role, over 1,000 yards passing, 64% completion, 9 passing touchdowns, I still think Plumlee is the better option here at quarterback, and I think UCF's offense is going to have its best week in a while here. And Oklahoma's defense has made big improvements from last year's team, but I still think, with last week or the last game against Texas, gave up over 500 yards. The defense is beatable. I think UCF moves the ball well on the ground here and puts up some points, keeps themselves in this game. I think we see UCF cover the number here on the road. Give me UCF plus the points. Next up, we see Georgia Southern taking on ULM. This one, 2 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN+. To me, this is kind of a nightmare matchup for ULM, and it's also a tough spot with them playing in kind of a letdown spot here with ULM, 21-20 last week against Texas State. It was an entertaining game, but a disappointing result for ULM, who had Texas State on the ropes in that one, but the Bobcats found a comeback victory. Now on the road for your second straight week, you're playing a Georgia Southern team you just don't match up well at all against. I mean, ULM defensively is giving up 32 points per game. The secondary has struggled, giving up over 300 passing yards in 3 of its last 4 games. And they also don't put a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, only 3 sacks combined in the last 3 games. That's good news for Davis Brin, who we've mentioned a few times on the rundown, that he's really a solid quarterback when he has time in the pocket. He struggles with his decision-making when he's under pressure. We saw that in that game against Wisconsin where he had 6 turnovers in that one and 5 interceptions and a fumble. But since then, he's actually been really solid in the passing game for Georgia Southern. He should have a lot of time in the pocket in this game, should be able to make the plays. And ULM's also struggling against the run. They're giving up over 200 rushing yards in their last 3 games. So Georgia Southern should be able to move the ball at will. When you look at the ULM offense, they're only scoring 19 points per game. They've had back-to-back weeks now with less than 300 total yards. And the passing game, only 52.7% completion this season. They've had 4 games where they've earned under 125 passing yards in a game. The offensive line's been okay, and the running game's actually been pretty solid. But when you're a team that's usually down big early in games, you're not able to run the ball as many times as you'd like. And against Georgia Southern, I think that's going to be the case here. I think ULM's going to be playing catch-up. They're not going to be able to run the football much, and Georgia Southern should be able to run away with this game. So give me Georgia Southern, land the big number at home. Next up, we see Washington State taking on Oregon. This one's going to be 3:30 Eastern. It's going to be on ABC. Now, we may not be getting the best number we could have got with, Oregon in this game with how much Washington State has struggled the last 2 weeks, but I still think that Oregon wins this game by 3+ touchdowns and covers this number. Washington State, last 2 games, one at home against Arizona, the other one against UCLA on the road, just miserable on both sides of the ball, giving up 470 yards against UCLA, 516 yards against Arizona, giving up 24 first downs to UCLA, 26 Arizona. And then on offense, 216 total yards against UCLA and 11 first downs, only 0.4 yards per carry on the ground. Offensively against Arizona, 6 points in that game scored, 234 total yards, and only 12 first downs with only 1.6 yards per carry. This team is not moving the ball at all. Their defense has struggled, especially in the secondary. And now you're facing an Oregon team that's probably fired up after that tough loss against Washington, 36-33. Oregon moved the ball at will against Washington. They had over 540 yards. They outgained Washington by over 100 yards in that game. If it wasn't for a few mistakes, in the red zone and the missed field goal at the end, Oregon would have had their chance to win that game outright. I think Bo Nix at home here puts on a show. I think Oregon bounces back and puts up plenty of points. And I think this Washington State offense, really tough to have a lot of faith in them on the road and in Eugene, a tough place to play. You could say this is a letdown spot for Oregon after that tough loss, but I just think they're the much better team here. I mean, Washington State was ranked a few weeks ago, but they're not playing like a ranked team right now. Give me Oregon laying the big number at home. Next up, we see Northwestern and Nebraska. This one, 3:30 Eastern. It's going to be on the Big Ten Network. Now, both of these teams are 3-3, and neither of these teams have to play Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State the rest of the season. Of course, Northwestern already played Penn State, and Nebraska already played Michigan. But realistically, when you look at the schedules on paper, these teams could make a run at making a bowl game this year. But I think Nebraska has a more realistic shot, and that includes a win here, and I think a cover as well. But Northwestern, I still think is the weakest team in this conference, and we saw that before the bye week they played Howard, and it was a really concerning game for me. As that was an FCS opponent, and you got outgained 312. You only had 312 yards compared to 331 for Howard. You only won the game by 3 points at home. You were a big favorite in that one. It was a good chance to put on a show at home, and you weren't able to do so offensively, and the defense also wasn't the sharpest. Now you're on the road at Nebraska, a really solid defensive team. It's really good against the run, 2.7 yards per carry given up for Nebraska this season on the ground. I think Nebraska has the big coaching advantage in this game with Matt Rule. I think the offense gets going here. I know the offense has had a lot of criticism this season, only scoring 19 points per game. But, Nebraska's earned over 300 yards every game since the beginning of the season against Minnesota, where they struggled. But the offensive line's been decent. The quarterback play has really been the problem for Nebraska. I think we see in the second half of the year start to improve, honestly. And Nebraska wins some of these games, pick up some W's, and make a bowl game out of the Big Ten. So give me Nebraska here. I like their chances to win this game and cover the number. I just don't think Northwestern's strong enough on either side of the ball. Next up, we see Oklahoma State taking on West Virginia. This one's going to be a 3:30 Eastern start time. It's going to be on ESPN. Now, if you backed in the last couple of weeks, Oklahoma State's been a really nice home underdog, as they were 11-point underdog against Kansas State, and they won that game outright. It was 29-21 the final. Then against Kansas last week, they were about 2.5, 3-point underdog in that game. They won that one outright as well, 39-32. But now they're on the road for only the third time this season, and the second time in Big 12 play. The first Big 12 road game against Iowa State, not a great performance there, 34-27 the final score, giving up 34 points and over 400 yards against one of the weaker offenses in the conference in Iowa State. Not really where you want to be, and now you're on the road facing West Virginia, who is coming off a really tough loss against Houston. We saw a Hail Mary 4th and 10 pass converted by West Virginia to take the lead late in that game, I think with 12 seconds or so. Then they had some, after the touchdown, they had some personal fouls for taunting for West Virginia that really helped Houston get a good field position on the last couple of plays. We saw Houston get to the 50-yard line, throw the Hail Mary themselves, and score the touchdown to win that game 41-39. But West Virginia still outgained Houston by over 100 yards in that game. West Virginia is the better team, in my opinion, on both sides of the football in this ball game. Their offense should get going like it did last week. The offensive line really held up. They ran the ball well. They had just under 400 passing yards and no sacks given up. And the defense for West Virginia, solid against the run at 3.6 yards per carry. Pretty solid against the pass as well, giving up less than 54% completion to opposing quarterbacks. To me, this is a really bad spot for Oklahoma State on the road. Give me West Virginia laying the points at home. Next up, we see Toledo and Miami, Ohio. This one, 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPNU. Now, I think this could honestly be the first of two meetings between these teams, as I wouldn't be surprised to see them play against each other in the MAC championship, with Miami, Ohio currently leading the MAC East and Toledo in first place in the MAC West, both teams with a 3-0 conference record. Now, both teams also with a 6-1 record overall this season, yet the home team in Miami, Ohio is the underdog in this game, which may be a surprise to some, but I still think Toledo is the best team in this conference, and I'm going with them here at a reasonable price, laying less than a field goal right now. We'll see where the number goes by Saturday, but Toledo, when you look at this offense, they're running the ball for over 200 yards in the last 5 games. And I know they hasn't been always the toughest teams that they're facing, some weaker teams in the MAC and in out-of-conference games, but they haven't given up a sack, this Toledo offensive line, in 4 straight games, only given up 2 sacks on passing plays all season, 1.1% of plays. One of the best offensive lines in football right now, and earning 5.8 yards per carry on the ground. The quarterback play has been solid, and the defense has also held up well, giving up only 337 total yards for a MAC defense that's very strong and solid. They get a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterbacks as well. Miami, Ohio, the defense is there and stepped up. They played some tough matchups. They played at Cincinnati. They played at Miami, so they're built for a game like this. But the offense is just where I have my concerns. Not really running the ball too consistently lately. In 2 of the last 3 games, less than 100 rushing yards against teams like Kent State and Western Michigan, who you could argue the 2 worst teams in the conference. So I have my concerns there. I don't think Miami, Ohio does enough on the ground or really in offense in general in this game to keep up with Toledo. I'm going to go with Toledo here on the road, lay the small number. The home team's done well in this series between these two teams, but I like the road team in this one. Next up, we see a big-time Big Ten rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State. This one's 7:30 Eastern on NBC. Now, I know Michigan State's got one of its weaker teams we've seen in quite a while, and the coaching staff issues, the offense is not putting up a lot of points. They've lost 4 straight games, and 3 of those were in Big Ten play. But I still think when you look at this season series, this rivalry series, Michigan State's done really well against the number. And, depending on the closing numbers vary from book to book. But Michigan State's 13-2 against the number against Michigan in the last 15 meetings. And a lot of those, they were underdogs in those games. And we've seen a few upsets even recently in 2020 and 2021, outright wins for Michigan State as an underdog. And we're getting a lot of points with the Spartans in this ball game at home. And, Michigan State, while the offense, like I said, has struggled, the defense has been there. I mean, they've had 4 games this season where they've given up 300 yards or less to their opponents. And, Michigan's offense, while it's starting to get going and, scored 50-plus points the last 2 games, we still yet to see this offense put up more than 500 yards in a game, something we can't say about Penn State and Ohio State, who have both done it this year. So I just think Michigan's offense not explosive enough in this game to cover this big number. A lot of things have to go your way in a game like this against a rival for you to cover a number like this. And we've seen the last few games in this season series, like last year, where Michigan was a far better team, but they still couldn't get over the hump and cover that huge number despite a 29-7 final score. Their offense just wasn't good enough in that game. I think we see, honestly, a similar scoreline. I wouldn't be surprised to see, like a 31-10 kind of final score where Michigan State just finds the cover in the end. Give me the points with the Spartans at home. Next up, we see Miami and Clemson. This one's going to be 8 o'clock Eastern on the ACC network. Miami's had 2 really unfortunate games the last 2 weeks. I mean, they're -7 the last 2 games in the turnover battle, and we saw the coaching gaffe against Georgia Tech in that 23-20 loss in the final seconds, and then double-digit loss against North Carolina last week. But Miami's offense still moving the ball really well on the ground, through the air. They've got over 450 yards in every game this season. And, they faced already a really tough defense earlier in the year against Texas A&M, who I think is top 10 in the country in defense. So while, Clemson's one of the tougher matchups Miami's had this season, Miami is home for this game. It's a revenge game after last year's embarrassing loss to Clemson. I don't think Clemson's offense is strong enough or potent enough to win this game and cover the number on the road. Clemson's defense, we know, one of the better defenses in the conference, but the offense has only eclipsed 450 yards once this year, and that was against Charleston Southern in a game that Clemson was not able to cover in the end. So I'm going to go with Miami here, plus the points. I think Miami is the better team here, getting a nice point because of the last couple of weeks' results. Give me Miami plus the points. Next up, we see Arizona State taking on Washington. This one's going to be 10:30 Eastern on Fox Sports 1. Going to go with a contrarian under in this game. Washington's played in a lot of high-scoring games, a lot of overs this season. We saw at the beginning of the year, they opened a game against Boise State 56-19. We've seen 59-32. We saw last week against Oregon 36-33 in a high-scoring affair. But Arizona State is honestly, even though their offense is not great, the defense has been there for the Sun Devils, giving up only 3.6 yards per carry. On the ground. They're getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. The secondary's been pretty solid in terms of pass efficiency defense. And I do think Washington, kind of going through the motions in a game like this could be considered a letdown spot after that big, exciting win against Oregon, keeping their playoff hopes alive. I think Washington wins this game comfortably, but wouldn't want to lay that many points in a game like this where I don't think a lot of points are going to be scored. Give me the under in Arizona State, Washington. Next up, we see UCLA and Stanford, the final game for Week 8 in college football, 10:30 Eastern on ESPN. Now, Stanford in the Pac-12 doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to scheduling their homecoming game, and we know in the SEC, at least in the last decade plus, we've seen a lot of teams when they know Vanderbilt is going to visit them to their home stadium. It's usually homecoming game, and we saw that with Florida a couple weeks ago in Gainesville. But Stanford now a 17-point underdog in their homecoming game against UCLA. I do think UCLA wins this game and covers the number as well. I think this, we've talked a lot about letdown spots this week. This could be considered another one against, with Stanford coming off that comeback victory against Colorado, down 29-0 at halftime. They come back, they win 46-43 in overtime. The offense had a great performance, their best performance of the season by far. But now you're facing a much tougher defense in UCLA, a defense that's much improved this year and has played well overall. Oregon State, even though UCLA lost that game on the road, UCLA still outgained it by 35 yards and had 8 more first downs in that ball game. So UCLA's big problem this year has been the turnovers. 7 interceptions from Dante Moore. He's a young quarterback. He's made some mistakes early on, but this is a much better matchup against Stanford, who's -2 overall this season in the turnover battle. So I think UCLA does a better job at taking care of the football, moves the ball pretty well on the ground and through the air, and I think the defense really stands tall. Give me UCLA in a blowout on homecoming night in Stanford. And that's it. Those are the games for Week 8 in college football. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And don't forget to put your college football picks in the comments section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.